teaching reading uniquely. To reverse underperformance, true school is here. Now let's be clear, our impact will be enormous. To the teachers across this nation, in eager anticipation, a sound from the streets that's so unique, it'll transform education.
True, yeah. Yeah, like true, yeah. Prepare yourself for more than just a hip-hop trend. Here to criticize and analyze through hip-hop lens. Prisons claiming our sons, use our daughters for fun. Pen is stronger than swords, so these books are stronger than guns. Breaking the pipeline, making they light shine. No more believing in all of these white lies. Dr. Shango Blake speaks, better tune to the station. This podcast will outlast all of your tribulations. This principle got principles, that's why y'all hating. Dr. Blizzy's vibrations felt across the nation. Recruiting the youth, only teaching the truth. Cause the future is bright and our kids are the proof. So if you wanna be you, then march to these drums. Welcome to the classroom, Hip Hop 101. Dr. Blake speaks, the lesson is begun. Welcome to the classroom, Hip Hop 101.
Watch this.
Welcome to another episode of the Classroom Hip Hop 101 with yours truly, Dr. Blizzy. Today's episode, The Million Man March, 25 years later, Untold Stories. The year was 1995. The event was the Million Man March. The message was the Day of Atonement. Check out this video clip.
Marchers took to the streets today to mark the 25th anniversary of the Million Man March. It commemorates the 1995 rally in Washington. CBS 2's Kevin Rincon has more now from Lower Manhattan.
They marched in the rain across the Brooklyn Bridge, reflecting on the Million Man March in Washington, D.C. 25 years ago. On that cold October day, crowds packed the National Mall, overflowing past the reflecting pool. Among the many who helped organize that rally in 1995, Shango Blake.
We were going from city to city, from town to town, meeting with groups and organizations, and we saw the spirit and the energy, and it was relevant then, and it's relevant now.
The march itself was led by Louis Farrakhan, who is himself a very controversial figure, but the message he shared that day still resonates.
Black man, you don't have to bash white people. All we gotta do is go back home and turn our communities into productive places.
And Blake says that's exactly what many have been doing since the march.
We've been working for 25 years, putting on college tours, youth day programs, initiatives in the community, programs centered around economic development. We've been out here, we've been working.
The crowd here represents generations of black men.
They all have a history of their own up in our community. Coming up, going through stuff, but now we made a commitment of atonement to make sure that we raise up our community.
We represent the solution. All we have to do is get an invitation and to be invited at the table.
And the issues, despite the changes we have seen, despite the many voices who come together to advocate for reform, the issues are still the same.
It's been oppression, it's been racism, it's been discrimination. And when you do that to anybody, if you create poverty, you know, there's going to be crime.
The message 25 years ago and the message up until now remains the same. It's one of encouragement, of empowerment. As black leaders say they have all the tools available to make change, it's a matter of doing it. In Foley Square, Kevin Rincon, CBS 2 News.
I'll never forget that day. I was in Washington covering that rally. And you know, the spirit and the energy, but most amazing, again, as Kevin said, issues are still the same.
They are.
Still
We're still discussing it. We got to move forward, make some real change.
This group of men dripping with the same passion that was planted 25 years ago today.
There's been years of work being put in, years of struggle, years of fighting, and we continue that fight today.
For activist and organizer A.T. Mitchell, this march across the Brooklyn Bridge to Foley Square is more than just steps.
Whoever's on your right, stay to your right.
It's a movement that spans generations.
We actually can change the trajectory of the things that are going on in our communities.
This is a march for and by black men.
in that historic display of unity and brotherhood.
And for some people marching across the Brooklyn Bridge today, this brings back vivid memories.
As one of the main organizers in 1995, we're so proud that this brother is making this call today.
Chago Blake was there in Washington 25 years ago.
The Million Man March was the Day of Atonement. Black men coming together saying that they're going to get more actively involved in their community. That work hasn't stopped.
Which is why even through the rain,
Black power! Black power! For black people! Black people!
they floated a powerful message for the future.
We say that today marks a shift, a pivotal shift in terms of what's happening in our community, that we reclaim the narrative, that we reclaim our schools, that we teach the proper history to our children, and that we build an economic and generational wealth for our community.
Mike Marza, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
25 years later, and the spirit of the Million Man March is still alive, although not often covered in major media. So Cassandra, what do you think about the significance of the Million Man March 25 years later?
I think that it's as important now as it was then. It was a monumental event, but it still reigns true here today with our young people. A Day of Atonement. We need to keep that at the forefront of our continued struggle for equity, justice, and freedom. Because if we don't, we lose sight of what's been happening in our struggles, and we feel like whatever Band-Aid they put on the sore is going to heal, and it's not going to happen.
And I just find it so interesting. You know, we're both educators, and you don't hear about the Million Man March being talked about, and the significance of it, the importance of it to history. How could you take such a mass mobilization of people for a cause and just act like it doesn't exist?
Well, that's what happens when you don't dictate the narrative. And again, when we don't tell our story, or we don't tell our children and pass it down in the village about what we need to talk about and the struggles that we've had and why we had to have this movement, then it continues to lose its zest, so to speak. We were talking earlier, this was one of the few lessons that I continue to teach every year. First lesson is the first week of the school. I teach how to analyze and break down the Pledge of Allegiance. This is the next lesson about the Million Man March. We look at that and the purpose and the why and how important it is. Then we go to the Million Women's March, then the Million Youth March, and we look at all of those goals that were supposed to be addressed years later and where we are and what do we need to continue to talk about and discuss, and how do we reignite the village or continue to fight as a village, a strong solidarity to solve the issues in our community.
So let's look at the facts. The Million Man March was called the Day of Atonement. The purpose of the Million Man March was for black men to take responsibility for themselves, to come back and be good men in the community and in the family. What is often not talked about is that at that mall in Washington, D.C., black men took a pledge to come back, get involved in their community, and atone for their irresponsibility as men. And from that march, great things happened. I think there was like 3,000 children. No, there was 3,000 black children that were adopted by black families. There was over 1 million black men who joined the voter registration rolls. And you know who was at that march?
You.
I was there, but also a future black president of the United States of America. President Obama was at the Million Man March.
Well, that says a lot about power in numbers and what happens when the village is reactivated and our roles are defined and we continue to show solidarity and move forward as we're supposed to. And our struggles to continue to seek equity, justice, and freedom.
So is the message relevant today?
Absolutely, absolutely, without any doubt. Even if they do not speak of the event in itself because they may not know or they choose not to know the masses, but in our community, it is an important part of history. It is a staple. It is now to be revered as if we're revering Kwanzaa or any other type of holiday or Day of Atonement, because this is what we were saying. We need to take care of ourselves, we need to do for self, and we need to get ourselves correct to pass down that legacy to our children.
The lesson learned is that we cannot allow others to tell our story. We must control our own narrative. So this is the Million Man March, 25 years later, Untold Stories. We'll be back after a word from our sponsors.
From its inception, New York City has always been a place where hurdles have been met with hope, and hope has inspired change. Today, just as in the past, New York City is taking this unprecedented moment in history and using it to drive innovation. Innovation that will not only help us today, but make us stronger tomorrow. The New York City Department of Education has partnered with Imagine Learning to provide over 1 million students with access to their online solutions. During this time of remote learning, all students can use Imagine Language and Literacy and Imagine Math at home.
I just think that the program is fantastic. I've seen a huge growth in so many of the students that I've had. I've seen an array of students come in, and they all seem to be benefiting from it and growing.
Imagine Learning just gives us another tool that we can use. Not everything always has to be with the teacher directly teaching.
When my teacher first put me on Imagine Learning, I started to learn a lot, and it was very fun. It's a really good learning experience for the kids.
We believe in its ability to move our kids, and we see it in their data and their ability to move forward, especially if they're behind. And then once you see the growth, it convinces you.
Help your students adapt and thrive today by visiting imaginelearning.com/at-home-nyc.
Welcome back to the Classroom Hip Hop 101 with Dr. Blizzy. We're sitting here with Professor James Blake, a key organizer of the Million Man March in 1995. He was the chairperson of the Million Man Women March Coordinating Council of Queens. Professor James Blake, welcome. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, yes. I have to say, you know, all transparency, Professor James Blake is the father of yours truly, Dr. Blizzy. And so it's an honor to have you here. It's an honor to be with you. Just want to kind of like get into the conversation. So Million Man March 1995, you played a pivotal role in getting those men to Washington, D.C. I'd like you to kind of like take us into what you had to do in the way of coalition building to actually get people to buy into the concept of the Million Man March and actually attend.
Well, the first thing we had to do was to fight the negative publicity that was being permeated in the community by the mainstream press, who did not want to see that march successful. So we developed a strategy. First effort was communication, outreach, making it very clear to people in the community what we were about and what we were trying to achieve with this march in 1995. After building a communication, we began to have relationship building. We started reaching out to every segment of the community, the religious community, the political community, the civic community, the youth in the community, etc., to build a relationship with them, to help them to understand that this is not just about 1995. This is an ongoing march over 400 years that will be coming together in 1995, just as another expression of our struggle for freedom, justice, and equality in this country.
You mentioned the press. There was a lot of things happening in the press that was intended to distract from the march. I remember there were conversations about, well, is this march for women? Women feeling left out. There was discussions about, is this just for Muslims? Mr. Farrakhan was used as a lightning rod to say, you know, this man is a hater. How could you attend a march under this guy? The whole concept of the message versus the messenger. How did you guys deal with that on the ground floor?
Well, you know, it's kind of funny in a sense, and I'm going to get back to communication. It's one thing that our people know in the black community. We know fake news, okay? You know, Trump is not the only one who first came up with the understanding of fake news. And we knew that anything that was going to benefit black people, that the mainstream media was going to distort. So we were able to communicate with our people because many of our people have been victims of distortion. Young black kids, nothing but gang members, or the black community is so riddled with crime that you can't even walk through it. All of these misconceptions of our community, so it was easy in that sense to get people to open up and say, look, let's take a good look at what we're trying to do in 1995. And in doing so, we were building communication, building trust. And once we got the communication, we went with the relationships. And then with relationships, we went to the next phase, which was implementation, getting something structured so that people can feed into it. In other words, we didn't ask folks just to come join the Million Man March, Coordinating Council of Queens. We had structure. We had a youth committee. We had an economic development committee. We had a social concern committee. We had a health and welfare committee. We had several committees, a fundraising committee. In other words, when a person came to our meeting and they raised their hand and say, we need to look at the parks. The parks in the community are not really serving the community. Great, brother, join the Health and Welfare Committee. We don't like the way the politicians are functioning in our community. Great, brother, we have a political action committee. So we had structure. So anyone who had a concern, we tried to structure the organization that there would be a committee that they can have an opportunity to express those concerns.
I recall, and as a person who was involved in the Education Youth Committee, yes. I remember the work that we did. But before I touch on that, I just wanted to ask you about this coalition building. Just wanted to go a little deeper in that. I remember you had a strategy to get the clergy involved, to get civil rights organizations involved, to get other men's groups involved. What was that strategy? Like specifically, what did you do to bring people together and build that coalition around the goals, purpose, and the mission of the march?
Well, we had one strong strategy, and that was a contract, sort of like an agreement. Mm-hmm. We would go to different organizations, and we would say, if you're a Muslim, come on with us. You're a Christian, come on with us. You're an atheist, come on with us. You're a Republican, come on with us. What made us one was that we were black. So we were not looking for you to come and, proselytize, or talk about your religious ideology or your political ideology. The only ideology that was important for us was that you were concerned about black people and that black people make progress. So leave your ideology at the door and come in as a black person, concerned with black people. And we have many roles in which we take in order to express that concern. But in the Million Man March Coordinating Council of Queens, the only road we had was black first.
That is so significant, and I think it has implications for today in terms of taking the things that divide us and putting that aside and organizing around the things that we can all agree on and unify around. Many of the issues that were happening in 1995, we see today. Right. Out of all the Million Man March local organizing committees, because there was this charge to go back to your community, get involved, organize. The local organizing committees that brought the men to the march were asked to stay intact and continue the work. And out of all those local organizing communities, the most effective and the one that lasted the longest has been the Million Man Women March Coordinating Council of Queens. Tell us about the things that you have done, and why is it so important that we make sure that we control our own narratives?
Well, it's important what you say about controlling our own narrative, because a lot of people don't understand all of the programs we did implement after the march. To name one is the Fathers and Their Families March. This was a march where we celebrate fatherhood. And every Father's Day, just before Father's Day, we'd have hundreds of black men walking down Merrick Boulevard from Francis Lewis to Roy Wilkins Park with their children on their shoulders, with black men holding their little daughters, with people coming out of the beauty parlor, barbershops, applauding us, people coming through with their cars blowing the horn. We'd have a Panamanian marching band leading the parade, and we had a slogan, and the slogan was, "What do we want?" Say fathers. Say, how do we want them? Strong. What do we want? Fathers. How do we want them? Strong. And we would march with that slogan. And I can tell you that the outpouring from the community was just absolutely beautiful. It was reported in the local press, but it didn't go any further than that because we know the press did not want people to know that these things were going on. We had the college
Yes.
store, which you were
Yes.
very instrumental in implementing, where we took hundreds of black youth to black colleges throughout this country, all the way down to Tuskegee and Mahara College, and Tennessee A&I. And those black young people were high school students. Some of them had never left New York City.
Yes.
Some were even junior high school, didn't even know the existence of black colleges. When they got on the bus, they were from Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, as far as Philadelphia, and they sat in their little cliques on the bus. By the time that bus came back to New York, they were one. They had united, and they were completely transformed. It was a transforming experience. What's so beautiful is that a lot of those students went to those colleges, graduated from those colleges, and some even implemented their own black college tours years later.
Absolutely. And I think about not just the college tour, I think about the Political Action Committee, the Harriet Tubman Democratic Club that came out of that. I think about how gang violence was addressed. A young man was killed at a strip club, and the strip club was shut down. And when these men were getting ready to go to war, the Million Man March stepped in and found a way to bring a peaceful resolution.
Well, actually, the Million Man March was asked to step in.
Yes.
Okay, by the community, because the brothers wanted to get revenge over the death of their friend. So we went and invited them to come to the meeting, and we went to their meetings, and we had a discussion. And in that discussion was fascinating. We said to them, look, this was a strip joint. The strip joint shouldn't even be in our community. If you really want to do something, don't go down there and shoot the place up. Let's shut it down. Let's shut it down. Let's organize and shut it down. It's going to take a lot of time because we're going to have to impress the city fathers and the authorities that this place has to leave our community. So there's going to be marching. I said, it's much harder to do it than just taking a gun and shoot somebody. If you really want to get, transform and change this thing and make it better, then be willing to put the energy necessary into making that happen. And so we joined with groups like CIMOTAP and NAAC groups and block associations, and we march day in and day out. And finally, we closed that joint, and not one bullet was shot.
Amazing. I love the theme about what do we want fathers, how do we want them strong? And I want to thank you for being a strong father to me. I also would like you to tell us an untold story. Now, I don't want you to think about the untold story. This untold story is phenomenal. I want to tell you were at the march and you had the pleasure of escorting somebody who spoke at the march. And if you could close us out with that story, we would appreciate it.
Well, I got to Washington, D.C. early because I was part of the National Organizing Committee. And so I wanted to get there early, and I got there early and got myself situated. And it was on my way to a special area in the march for what they call VIPs. So I got a call from my wife, Dr. Bessie Blake, and she said, hey, what are you doing? I said, I'm at the mall. She said, well, Rosa Parks is at the Watergate Hotel, and she's coming to the march, and you need to go over there and see if you can help her. Now, I have to say, Rosa Parks and my family became very close prior to the march. So I said, oh, my goodness, I'm going to miss my spot. I mean, because even at that time, it was like 7 o'clock in the morning, the place was packed with men. But I went over to the Watergate Hotel, met with Mrs. Parks, and was talking to her. And to make a long story short, when it got time to go, I started to sneak out, and her aide said, Mrs. Parks is going to be in this car, and in that car will be so-and-so, and sitting right next to Mrs. Parks, I will be sitting, and sitting right behind Mrs. Parks will be Professor Blake. I said, oh, God. So I got a chance to get into the car and drive with Mrs. Parks all the way up to the stage of the march, assist her on the stage. And when they called her to come to the podium, they asked me to escort her to the podium. And I was able to see the full scope from that viewpoint of what was happening on that day in terms of the numbers. And it was like looking like at an ocean where there was at the horizon, the men were all the way, everywhere you look at the horizon. And they were yelling, Rosa, Rosa, Rosa. And she gave a wonderful speech. You can go on YouTube and see it.
Listen, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the untold stories and the significance of the Million Man March. And we hope that you come back so that we can hear even more stories about your life and the work that you have done.
There's so much more, and I want to say I'm proud of you, son.
Thank you. This has been Untold Stories of the Million Man March, 25 years later. Hi, I'm Dr. Blake, CEO of True SK Consultants. True SK Consultants, the True stands for Teaching, Reading Uniquely to Reverse Underperformance, and the SK stands for School. So we're not old school, we're not new school, but we're true school. We are an innovative company focused on whole school reform. And today I'd like to introduce you to my corporate partners who focus on parent and student engagement.
Hi, I'm Savannah Banana. I'm an entrepreneur. I am 8 years old. I am a fashion designer and I am in 2nd grade. The company I own is Savannah Banana Clothing. I am partnered up with True SK Consultants to show kids how cool it is to be a business owner.
Hi, I'm Brazil Dow and I'm an entrepreneur. Hi, I'm Princess Dow and I'm an entrepreneur.
We are the Dow twins.
We are 8 years old in the 2nd grade.
We act, we model, we have a store online, we write children's books, and we co-develop a learning app that helps kids with spelling words and sight words.
But what we are most known for is our kid-friendly brand of water called Water 2 Kids that we created to get kids healthy with hydration.
We partnered with True SK Consultants to teach kids the importance of healthy habits
and how to become entrepreneurs.
Hi, I'm Chloe Pope and I'm an entrepreneur.
I am 10 years old and in the 4th grade. I am the CEO and owner of Chloe D Speaks. I am a celebrity kid blogger and I am also a proud partner of True SK Consultants, and I'm here to teach young kids like me how to start their own businesses.
Now I'd like to introduce you to the parents of my partners.
Hi, I'm Melina Dow. I'm the mommy of the Dow twins. Myself and my young entrepreneurs have partnered with True SK Consultants and Dr. Blake to share all of the information that we've learned on our journey. We want to help parents and their children learn new methods of teaching kids healthy habits and entrepreneurship.
Hello everyone, my name is Sandra Jordanay and I'm the mother of Chloe D. She is the CEO of Chloe D Speaks, and we're both partners of True SK Consultants. This venture is very important to me because Chloe, when she started reading, she wasn't interested in reading or writing, and I found a way to have her improve her reading and writing skills through blogging. And through the blogging, we created the company Chloe D Speaks. And I think that the model that I use to help Chloe become a better writer, a better reader, and a better interviewer was through the blogging aspect. And so I'm happy to be with True SK Consultants to help teach parents how to get their children involved in improving whatever skills they need to improve along with entrepreneurship.
Hi, my name is Jessica Smith. I'm the proud mother of Savannah Banana. I have partnered with True SK Consultants to show parents how cool it would be to teach their children how to own and operate their very own business. My intentions are to show parents the step-by-step process on how to begin a business for their child.
I often talk to you and you often see our sponsors from True SK Consultants, the Dow twins. Well, they just came out with a new workbook and flashcards. I am so proud of you. Look at these kid entrepreneurs doing their thing. I want everybody to go out and support the Dow twins. We are sitting here with Reverend Conrad Tillard. He is the former minister of Muhammad's Mosque number 7 and was very instrumental in organizing the 1995 Million Man March New York effort and on a national level. Welcome, Reverend Conrad Tillard. How are you?
Dr. Blizzy, it's great to be here.
Thank you. So you were played a pivotal role in the organizing of the Million Man March. And I want to kind of go back pre-march. What was the reason for the march, and what did you have to do in your role of minister of Muhammad's Mosque number 7 at that time to galvanize the community and get the brothers to the mall?
Well, first of all, people forget that the first all-men's meeting that Minister Farrakhan called was actually in Harlem at the 369th Armory. And we had about 17,000 brothers that came to that march in 1994, the winter of 94. It was so enormously successful that he started a national tour and for having men's meetings all over the country. And it's at that meeting, and it's a source of some controversy, that he said that he was going to call a meeting and take 1 million men to Washington, D.C. And so that's the precursor, actually, to the Million Man March.
You know, it's interesting because people think that the march just happened.
Right.
But like what you're saying in terms of going across the country, speaking to men across the country, and then what had to happen in terms of building relationships on the local level, the work that you did and others. What was some of the laboring that happened prior to the march that let you know that it was going to be successful, even if the media and other critics didn't?
Well, the genius of the march, you know, it was a great collaboration. Of course, the inspiration of it was Minister Louis Farrakhan. But very early on, he made the decision that obviously this was a march that had to encompass the entirety of the black community. And so Reverend Ben Chavis, Dr. Ben Chavis at the time, was immediately brought in as a co-chair and a national organizer. And of course, with that, Dr. Ben Chavis brought much of his knowledge of the civil rights community, the diverse marches that had taken place in the past. James Bevel, Reverend James Bevel, who had been Dr. Martin Luther King's acolyte and mentor to Jesse Jackson, this brilliant, strange but brilliant man of the movement who's gone on to the Lord now. He was also a key component. And so it was decided very early on that the march would be organized through local organizing committees. And to the minister's great credit, he said that this would not just be a Nation of Islam march, but it would be a march that incorporated all elements of the black community. And so, as you just said with Professor Blake in Queens, the local organizing committees, you know, had pastors, they had professors, they had local people in the community, men and women that were involved in the organizing of this effort across the country. And so, for example, in New York, I was the chair in New York along with Dr. Calvin Butts of Abyssinian Baptist Church and Bob Law. And so, you know, we spoke and met with folks. Many times I would come to Queens, but I mean, I was in Westchester, I was in the Bronx, I was all over Brooklyn, speaking to church groups, community groups, Jack and Jill, I mean, you name it, any sororities and fraternities.
And they played a significant role.
And so this was truly a march that the entirety of the black community was very much involved in and contributed greatly to the success of the march.
Now, how did you do at the time the distractions? There were media outlets that were making it about Minister Farrakhan, or there were questions about, well, this is some kind of thing where it's not inclusive of women. How did you push past that noise to still get the message across?
Yeah, that was a great challenge because, you know, people wanted to make it about everything other than what it was about. It was about black men coming together, taking an oath, taking a pledge, and taking responsibility for our own communities, for our families, for our own behavior, and pledging to do better. James Bevel, along with the minister, actually came up with the concept of atonement. That was a theological concept that sort of gave the framework for what the march was all about. It's very interesting because most of the civil rights leaders, including Reverend Jackson, I spent a lot of time with him before the march. In fact, 1 or 2 weekends prior to the march, I flew into D.C. And I ran into Reverend Sharpton, and he and I talked. And he said, well, why don't you come with me? We're going to get Reverend Jackson. So I rode with him. And when we saw Reverend Jackson, of course, he was happy to see me and very excited to talk to me about the march. A lot of people don't know I actually started with him in the '84 campaign, so we have a long relationship. And he kept stressing, those of you brothers with Farrakhan, you got to get him to understand there needs to be a legislative component to this, because most civil rights leaders knew marches from the perspective of what is the legislative component? What are we trying to get from the government? But what he didn't understand was that the Million Man March was never about a legislative component. It was literally about black men coming together and saying, we pledge to do better in our own communities. And so Reverend Jackson, at the time, didn't really understand that. In fact, I met with Bill Clinton, right before the march that night at the CBC with Reverend Jackson. He introduced me to the president and said, and he said, yeah, I know this is coming. He said, I won't be in town that day, but I was able to share with him what the objectives of the march were. And he said it was a good thing, And so that's a story. That's an untold story. Okay, that was breaking news right there. Jackson and Bill Clinton and I, and really talking about what the march was all about. But it was a great effort on the part of the community. It was a noble effort. It was one of the greatest marches ever in the history of the United States. I think only the Women's March after Trump was elected, which was a global march, probably eclipsed it in terms of people there. But the Million Man March wasn't against anybody. It was a positive, it was motivated out of a positive
That's a great
motivation.
point, because there was a lot of fear leading up to the march. People didn't even know what was going to happen, and there was all this black men coming together, what's going to happen kind of thing that happened. And I recall it was a sea of brotherhood, sea of love. I got to thank you. You don't remember this, but I was on your personal security, and you gave me the detail of securing C. Vernon Mason. And so I got a chance to go up on the steps, and I had an opportunity to look out into the crowd, and it was like just this never-ending crowd. It was like looking out into the ocean.
Yes, it was.
A lot of people, and I want to bring this up because I just finished speaking to Professor Blake, and he talked about all the post-march activities that were happening in Queens. But there was this thing that came after the march, which was, well, what did the march produce? What happened since the Million Man March? And I recall that the work you were doing, you were stopping conflicts, violence. I know that there was some conflicts between two different, popular rap groups. And I felt like all of that was a continuation of the message of the Million Man March. In your estimation, what has been the result of the Million Man March? And is there anything that we should be doing more, or did we drop the ball, or what is your take on the post-march message?
Well, one of the things that people forget was that there was an immediate national drop in crime in the inner cities before the Million Man March and before the emphasis on the all men's marches. The Nation of Islam was involved in a Stop the Killing tour around the country, and the focus of the nation was on the urban violence, because remember, this is during the crack era. This is when the crack wars were taking place, and when the urban cities were war zones.
In fact, the National Crime Bill
absolutely
in 1994 came as a result of that.
94,
yes, sir.
Immediately prior. So in 93, the entire focus was stop the killing. 94, heading toward the march, the focus was on calling men to Washington. And unfortunately, the world has now seen Rudy Giuliani exposed as for being the person that he is, and an evil, intemperate person. We knew that then, but mayors like Giuliani claimed credit for the drop in crime in the black community, in urban communities. But for those who really understood, and there were studies, sociologists studied, criminologists studied, and they saw that there was a direct correlation between the Million Man March and the decline of crime, which was a major sea change in America. Unfortunately, a lot of the big city mayors tried to claim credit in terms of the policing tactics that they had implemented. But that march was a clarion call to men from coast to coast. Bloods and Crips were there. People who had been involved in criminal activity were there. And it was a call to black men. So it's something like that is harder to evaluate than something where the focus is on legislation. The March on Washington was about jobs and justice. In the immediate aftermath of that, several years after, you got the passing of the Public Accommodations Bill and the Voting Rights Act. Well, that was the focus of the civil rights movement at that time. Those are two laws that were passed, and they were very important. But the purpose of the Million Man March was a more internal sort of black people looking at our community, particularly black men, and saying, we have to do a better job. And so I think that legacy, there are a million, just as many men that were there, and some said as many as 2 million. There are millions of legacies and millions of examples. I remember one of the great families in New York, David Banks, Chief Banks, and his sons were on the cover. Philip Banks Sr., Philip Banks Jr., and David Banks, the great educator. Time Magazine did a cover on that great family from Queens.
Yes.
All three men involved in the Million Man March, and the principles of the march were carried out through their participation in the march and in their lives every day. So there are millions of stories. You and your dad.
I'm one of those stories.
I mean, there are millions of stories that come from the Million Man March.
Speaking of Dave Banks, we work very closely together with an organization called Black Influencers United. But we were on a show, and Dave Banks said that the inspiration for the Eagle Academy Foundation was, in fact, the Million Man March, and Minister Farrakhan's call that black men go back and get involved in their community. Question I have for you.
Yes.
Is the message of the Million Man March still relevant today?
I think it's more relevant today than ever before. I think that when you look at the condition of black men today, particularly our young men I'm concerned about, as society has shifted to a great emphasis on girls, women and girls, in terms of empowerment, leveling the playing field, I'm deeply concerned that our young men are being lost in a void. And so I'm deeply concerned about young boys, about young men, about middle-aged men. And so the message of the Million Man March hopefully can live on. Hopefully, of course, because of the messenger or the person who called the march has never been received by the historians, never been received by the politicians as a march that should be lifted up and commemorated. But hopefully those who participated, it was a very diverse group of people. We will keep the legacy and the spirit of the Million Man March alive because it's bigger than one man, it's bigger than one movement. It really is about the community and that message for black men no matter what their background is. And we have to keep that message alive.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Reverend Conrad, for being with us today, and thank you for your contributions to this historic march. I believe your work and the work of others will keep this legacy alive. This has been the untold story of the Million Man March, 25 years later.
Bringing modern technology to schools across the country, bridging the gaps between the administration, students, and their parents, creating a secure and enriched educational environment for both students and administration. We are WorldCast Live. WorldCast Live's groundbreaking technology was founded under these 5 principles: communication, parent engagement, instruction, fundraising, and security. Communication. Close the communication gap within their institution. For example, principals can speak directly to parents live, sharing beginning of the year message, or remind parent of important upcoming events. Parent engagement. Help schools increase parent and community engagement. For example, parents can log into PTA meeting from home or on the go with full interactive engagement. Instructions. Provides a platform to showcase school projects and curriculum to parents who cannot make it to school event. In addition, WCL can be used as an instructional tool to teach student filmmaking and broadcasting process, thus learning a skill that will make them career and college ready. Fundraising provides a way to generate revenue for schools and organizations to fund school projects, sports teams, clubs, and activities. Security. Your privacy is our #1 priority. Creating a digital space where our children and education providers are protected is at the very core of our platform. Cloud education is the future, and WorldCast Live aims to integrate technology in all facets of the school curriculum. Be a part of the leap forward that will revolutionize online education.
Here with another exciting episode.
That bounce in between, right? So
You can know what's going on.
Exactly. That's the best way to do things.
is because conditioning is an extremely important aspect.
How long have you been doing this?
Almost 3 years.
Lift. So you think about shining your kneecap over to your left side.
Come, if you got a real love for me.
Kinda gets funky, go ahead.
Stay away. If you got games and tricks for me. I want a man that means everything he say, and not a boy full of play, pulling rabbits out your hat every day. Ooh, baby, I'm scared of you. I don't believe in magic. I believe in love everlasting. I can't understand that Houdini was a great musician.
Man, KG really rocked the house. Today's new artist spotlight is someone you're all familiar with. It's our super producer, Cassandra Jackson, AKA Half Pint. Check out our interview. So, welcome to the Classroom Hip Hop 101. This is our new artist spotlight feature. Now, normally, when we say new artist, we're usually talking about a new and upcoming artist. But we have a very special guest for many different reasons here today. So you know this person you've seen on the Classroom Hip Hop 101 as our super producer, Cassandra Jackson, and you may often hear me refer to her as Half Pint. Now, Half Pint is her recording artist name, and it's just a pleasure, number one, to have you on the show, Half Pint. Welcome.
Thank you. Peace, my brother. I appreciate it. You know, when Half Pints in the building, oh my God.
Why the name?
The real hip hop.
Yes.
I think because it was organic, and what was happening is that when I got the track and I'm listening to it, I had something totally different written, but it just didn't feel and set right with me. So I just kept listening to it, and I was like, hold up, no, no, this is, I think it's something else. So it just something else just came over, and I ended up rewriting the entire song, and that's what came out. It was a groove that I felt. Shout out to Touchy Feely who actually produced the cut. I can't even, I don't even know how to explain what happened, but it was almost like an awakening in a sense while I'm writing. And it just happened to just flow. And then I had the verses done, and I'm looking for a chorus, and I'm like, yo, nah, that doesn't work. And then it just hit me, real hip hop. And this is like an ode and a homage to the pioneers. And my thing is that, we tend to listen and let others dictate our narrative and tell us what hip hop is. And the original pioneers and those who have been in the trenches and actually created this culture and cultivated it to what it has now become are forgotten, and they're not even mentioned when interviews are being done with some of the newer artists that are out. And there's such a disconnect between the history of it, and it reflects the history of Black history and how we have disconnected from our elders. And I wanted to pay a homage to them, and I wanted to let them know that they're not forgotten, that they're respected, and that I appreciate them, and that they needed to know, the rest of the world needed to know who these people were, and that hip hop is more than just rapping.
To say, I think that it's a phenomenal song. I love the fact that you use an educational setting as the background. As you know, I'm the nation's hip hop principal, and that we have that in common. How we use hip hop to educate and inspire, because we know that one of the elements of hip hop is knowledge and purpose, and
absolutely
knowledgeable and purposeful. How can people get the song? And how can people, more importantly, get in contact with you just to follow your movement in terms of what's happening with Half Pint?
Well, the song in itself is on every platform that's available: Spotify, SoundCloud, Mixcloud. The video is on YouTube. And again, it is a part of a compilation album from True Groove All Star called 2020 Vision. And on this, again, this was my opportunity to kind of have something to say, but I wanted to make sure that I pay homage before I move any further to those who actually paved that path for me to be able to have a voice and call it something called hip hop. You could, on Facebook under my name Cassandra Jackson. On Instagram it's under Goldwire 2002, and under Twitter it is Half Pint NSC for No Self Control.
Song again, real hip hop. Check it out on all social media platforms: Instagram, Spotify, and a numerous of other platforms. As Half Pint has said, Half Pint, it's been a pleasure to have you as a guest this time, not as the producer of the Class Hip Hop 101. We'll be checking out for the song and all other kind of musical presentations that you will be presenting to us. Thank you. Shout out to my Hip Hop for Justice family. Shout out to my BU family. We're closing out with our very own Half Pint, the real hip hop.
You don't stop, it's that real hip hop. B-boys pop a lot, sweeping up rock. Graffiti is an art, but they ran from cops. MCs bragged a lot about what they got. DJs packed the spot, spinning, playing and rock from block to bath and beatbox. That was real hip hop. Hip hop, you don't stop. DJs make the party rock. MCs keep the crowd on lock. B-boys make some noise. B-girls, they run the world. Hip hop, you don't stop. DJs make the party rock.
And again, you can find us on all social media under the Classroom Hip Hop 101. So check us out on YouTube, check us out on Instagram, and also check out my new show, Dr. Shungo Blake Speaks, on Spotify.
Welcome to WorldCast Live's immersive entertainment platform, the new norm in live streaming media and technology. During times when it's impossible to be physically present at live concerts or performances, we've created an innovative way to bring fans together to experience live entertainment sociably and interactively. The WCL platform specializes in the viewer experience before, during, and after the actual performance. This is done by utilizing our state-of-the-art streaming platform, AR Tech, a digital wallet, news feeds, and on-demand videos. Artists can perform from any location easily and professionally with the ability to monetize their performance in a variety of ways. Participating brands can offer rewards and access to content to viewers for simply viewing or interacting with any event-related content. The future of live entertainment is now. For more information, send us an email at info@worldcastlive.com.